Alright, so in the previous video that I made earlier this week, I was going over the process of setting up the home automation system to display a certain web page that I wanted to be seen uh, during the hours that I'm at work. Now, part of the configuration part of this was that I needed to do a fresh install of Windows 10. So what I did was I had the ISO on a flash drive, and I used Rufus to image it. Then I put it into an Intel NUC. It's an older model Intel NUC, but it's still pretty good for what I was using it for. Now, the first obstacle that I encountered with doing the setup was I didn't have any more like inputs on my KVM switch, so that I could actually like switch between devices. So I had to use a game capture card. Now my Elgato game capture card is the Game Capture HD, and the problem with that is that there is like a slowness with the um, reception, or what do you want to call it. Now the problem with that is that when I was trying to use my mouse to select options, it wouldn't let me select options. So there was a slowness within the response of it. Um, so that was the first issue that I encountered. The second issue that I encountered was after the installation, when I went to go and configure remote desktop. And the problem with configuring remote desktop for me was when I enabled it for network authenticated users, but I'm not using a domain controller on my network here. So when I tried to use an account, I just put in like my username and my password for that computer. Normally, I don't have to specify that it's a local device, as long as I remove any like question about whether or not it's on a domain. It should just go and say, "Hey, we recognize your account. We'll let you in." So I got kind of stuck on that a little bit. Um, and then remoting into it was a little bit of a hassle because there was two networks. But the problem that I had was even before I configured the wireless part of it, it kept losing connectivity even though it was wired. So once I configured the wireless card for that device and I moved it over to where the TV is, I didn't have any more problems with trying to remote into it. But before that, it kept jumping from the wireless to the hard network. So I kept having to use like two different IP addresses. Um, but once I moved it, I didn't have any more issues. But with the username, that I had to do the dot backslash and then the username in order to force it to see that it was a local account. Um, but it would establish the connection with the remote device before making me do that. Now, the second part of the issue with that video was that I really didn't go over um, the actual script. So the script has two functions. It loads the web page, and then the secondary function is that it does a local host ping. And I'm not super familiar with the local host ping, so I really didn't know what it was doing or why it was there. So I removed local host ping for all entries in the page, and I crashed my computer. So I had to reboot the computer and then put those local host pings back into the file. Um, so what it is it is it's serving as a timeout function. It's not necessary that there are other ways about going about doing that, um, but that is the function that it is serving. And then what was the next issue? The next issue, okay, was with the scheduling of tasks. Um, so a lot of tasks you can schedule to run as like a system service, but for whatever reason, in order to launch Chrome itself and make it visible, it has to run under an actual account. So I did have to configure the local account that I had created for the admin rights. I could have configured a guest account for that, but it's just not necessary at the moment. So I just let it run as the account that is set up on it, and I didn't have any more issues after I configured the task. Um, Now, one thing that I know that a lot of people will do is that when they do schedule the task, that they don't actually schedule it to like relaunch on failure. So when something fails, it stays shut down. I configured the script to where if if the application closes on its own and it does not notify anybody, it relaunches. That's the way that I want it to work. But I also set up the computer to process Windows updates automatically because I don't want to have to remote into it to force it to reboot in case of DNS changes or whatever the protocols are on my network in terms of software updates. Now, what was the next issue that I encountered? Uh, so that was the last issue that I had with the actual script. And then the third part of the setup was with Home Assistant. Now, I am going to actually show what I ended up doing because the first few attempts that I did for this really didn't work. Um, they worked, but they weren't working in terms of the task schedule and the automation that I wanted it to do. So I'll go and switch really quick to my Home Assistant to show what I actually ended up doing. So if we come into Home Assistant and we go to settings and yeah, could have swore, okay, I'm not going to worry too much about that. It's showing previous data. I'm not going to worry too much about that at the moment. Now, I will say that the automations should be up to date. Yes, they are. So I ended up creating 3 separate tasks. Two of them are for work specifically. So the lights I have set up to where they will only turn on from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. But in addition to that, it also turns on the TV. Now, that's fine. And I also have it configured to where it will turn off the TV after a certain period of time. And yes. So if you look at the duration, so what this actually means here is the living room sensor motion stopped detecting motion, right? So that's kind of self-explanatory, but the duration part. So it's not a duration in terms of, well, I've seen you moving for 5 minutes. No, what it's saying is that from the last time that it sees motion or detects motion, so 5 minutes after it stops detecting motion, that is when it's going to deactivate this. Um, so that's that. And honestly, I really didn't have to do 2 tasks for that. I could have just built the 1 task. Um, because after 5 minutes, it would automatically turn off. Now, the task that I ended up creating in terms of changing the input of the TV, I had to create a separate task. Now, initially, when I created this task, was I did the when the Sony is turned on, and the original and was actually when the event was triggered. So I had it tied to a event entity. I didn't have it tied to like a time slot. So I did change it to a time slot because the event entity wasn't working the way that I wanted it to work, which is basically it just would not redirect the input. So I changed it to between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. So as long as the other tasks that I have assigned to like work are triggered, then this will work. And what it does is you do have to specify your source, and this is done manually by you if you choose to use it. Now, this task, it does require you to kind of play with it. So what I recommend is if you do create this task, you need to run it. You need to click these 3 dots, and you need to click Run Actions to make sure that it actually changes the input of the TV. So it is very clear what it wants to do. So we got that, and that was the biggest issue or the biggest hurdle for the automation because I kept having to test it and trying to make sure that it would actually work. Um, let's see. All right. So that was the last issue that I had with that one. Um, and then, yeah, by the end of that video, I was still struggling with setting the task because I didn't realize that it had to use a local account. So I was still trying to play with the idea of running a system account in order to run that task. But for whatever reason, Chrome would run in the background, but it would not run in the foreground, so I couldn't actually see what it was trying to do. So is what I would say was the important thing that I really wanted to touch up on, was the fact that there was a task that had to be created to turn on the lights and turn on the TV, and then there was a follow-up task which you could trigger by the entity being triggered, which is what I was trying to do, but that part did not work. So I had to set it up to where it would only trigger between hours, which didn't used to work, but it works now. So if there are any questions, please feel free to send me an email. My email address is eddygtechnologies@gmail.com. Now, as for my tasks for this weekend, I am receiving a new server rack, and I will try to at least record some video on the build out. I have two R720 servers. I have one R720 and one R720XD, and those are going to be the servers that I'm going to rack on the system and set up. I probably won't get around to actually running the systems right now because I'm in the process of upgrading the memory, and the memory modules that I currently have are not compatible with what I'm trying to upgrade to. So I have one server that is not running. But as soon as I do have that running, I will definitely let everybody know. Because there are some other automations in the system that I do have running, but right now that they're just not going to report anything. And one of those automations is in terms of my Proxmox system. So Proxmox is very specific. So you can find out how much processing power that you're using, what your disk utilization percentages, your health, your last boot, memory usage, and status. But the cool thing is that you can actually monitor individual clients running in that virtualization system. So my EVE-NG device, or my EVE-NG virtualized network testing system, I can monitor that. I can monitor like all the stats involved with that particular virtual machine. Because one of the issues that I have encountered with that system is I definitely did not consider how much processing power was actually in use. So I have had to like shut down the virtual machines and update that information. But when I actually do have this server running again and actually have it functional, I do plan on building out a new dashboard for all of my virtual machines. EVE-NG is just one of them. I also have virtual machines for security testing as well as security assessments. Well, testing and assessments is basically the same. Can't remember what the terminology is for this. Security benchmarks. So I have a Zabbix server running, which tells me basically if my virtual machines as well as my actual machines are meeting any kind of like security policies. But then I have to build out my domain controller again. And the last time that I built a domain controller in order to meet security policies, I did something to it, and I can't remember what it was, and it took down the entire network. So, like I said, this is an experiment for me. I'm just having fun with this, and this is really for me just a event to where I don't really work with people too much out in the public. I really don't. And I also don't work with people in my own personal life. So this is kind of my way of re-socializing with the outside world. Um, but yeah, so that was my plan. The other part of my plan for this weekend is I'm going to be resetting up and reconfiguring my AV network. I have a whole home audio system, and I really want to reintegrate that into my Google speakers. So once I do that, then I can play all of my music that I've gotten through iTunes and the iCloud and all that stuff. I want to be able to process that through my Plex server and then force it out to all of the Google speakers. I do not like Google's current function, where you basically have to go to a Google Hub or the Google Nest Hub in my kitchen, and you have to specify each individual speaker that you want to listen to the music from. I shouldn't have to do that. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to automate it to where once I play it, automatically goes to all the speakers. Um, so yeah, at this point, that this is what my current network looks like. Um, but I will be expanding on it, and I will be doing a lot more with it. I'm also going to be doing a lot more database stuff and a lot more benchmark um, monitoring and stuff like that. So if you all have any questions, any concerns, any ideas, just feel free to let me know.